I don't think I was aware of the fact that I was the first African American female to star in her. I was hospitalized twice because of stress. We call everything stress today, so we'll call it being the first black woman to win a Tony Award. I was aware of the importance of that for everyone, not just black.
Before America was ready, before television dared to change, there was one woman who stepped into the spotlight and rewrote history. In 1968, Diahann Carroll appeared on prime television as Julia Baker, a widowed mother, a professional nurse, and a black woman leading a major TV series for the very first time. But behind the laughter, the elegance, and the success, there were battles, sacrifices, and controversies the world never saw. This is the hidden journey of Julia, the show that changed everything. September 17, 1968, a Tuesday night, millions of Americans turned on their television sets expecting the usual. But what they got was revolution. There she was, Diahann Carroll, elegant, poised, professional, a black woman in a nurse's uniform, not playing a maid, not playing a stereotype, but playing a fully realized human being with dreams, struggles, and dignity. NBC had just premiered Julia, and television would never be the same. Are you enjoying this story, Julia? Then help the channel with your subscription. Look, 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you are part of that group, take the chance and subscribe now. It's free, and that way you'll keep receiving amazing stories from TV shows we still miss. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. But to understand what this moment meant, we have to go back, way back, to a little girl born Carroll Diahann Johnson in the Bronx, New York, on July 17, 1935. Her parents were working class. Her father was a subway conductor. Her mother was a nurse. They lived modestly, but they had big dreams for their daughter. They saw something special in her, a spark, a talent that couldn't be ignored. At 6 years old, Diahann was already singing in the church choir. Her voice was pure, angelic. By the time she was 10, she was winning talent contests all over New York City. She attended the High School of Music and Art in Harlem. She was training, preparing, believing that one day, somehow, she would break through. But breaking through as a black woman in the 1950s, that was a fantasy. The doors weren't just closed, they were locked, bolted, guarded. Still, Diahann pushed. She entered beauty pageants, she performed in nightclubs, she sang on stage. And in 1954, at just 19 years old, she won a talent competition on a television show called Chance of a Lifetime. That win changed everything. It led to her Broadway debut. It led to Hollywood. It led to a nomination for an Academy Award in 1974 for Claudine. But before all of that, there was a long, painful climb. In 1962, she became the first black woman to win a Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical for her role in No Strings. She was stunning, she was talented, she was undeniable. But even then, the roles offered to her were limited. She played nightclub singers, she played exotic women, she played supporting characters in white people's stories. Until 1968. That's when producer Hal Conter came to her with an idea, a groundbreaking idea, a series about a widowed black nurse raising her young son in Los Angeles, a show where race wasn't the plot, it was just life. Diahann hesitated. She knew what this meant. She knew the pressure. She knew the scrutiny. She knew that if this show failed, it could set back representation for years. But she also knew this was the moment. So she said yes, and Julia was born. The show premiered to massive ratings. Over 25 million viewers tuned in. Critics were intrigued. Audiences were captivated. For the first time, a black woman was the star of her own show. Not a sidekick, not a servant, a leading lady. But not everyone was celebrating. September 1968 was supposed to be a moment of triumph. But what Diahann didn't know was that the spotlight would become a target. Almost immediately, the letters started arriving. Hate mail, threats, venom pouring in from across the country. One viewer wrote that they were going to hang me and burn my home, Diahann later revealed. The threats were real, they were specific, they were terrifying. This wasn't new territory for her. Years earlier, while starring in the Broadway musical No Strings, she had received anonymous death threats. In 1966, while filming Hurry Sundown in the South with an integrated cast, the Ku Klux Klan had threatened the entire production. Tires were slashed. A cross was burned on set in the middle of the night. But this was different. This was weekly. This was relentless. This was national. And the attacks weren't just coming from racists. They were coming from her own community. Black activists and intellectuals criticized the show harshly. They said Julia was too safe, too sanitized, too white. They called Diahann a sellout, a terrible sellout, she was told to her face. The poet and musician Gil Scott-Heron mentioned Julia in his revolutionary anthem, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, comparing her to Bullwinkle, the cartoon moose. The implication was clear. Julia wasn't real. She was a fantasy, a joke. Critics wrote that Julia's plush suburban setting was a far, far cry from the bitter realities of Negro life in the urban ghetto. Even Diahann herself struggled with the role. In 1968, she admitted publicly, "At the moment, we're presenting the white Negro, and he has very little Negro-ness." She wanted the show to do more, to say more, to reflect the pain and struggle happening in the streets. But NBC wouldn't let her. The network was terrified of controversy. They wanted integration without conflict. They wanted representation without reality. And Diahann was caught in the middle, trapped between two worlds, too black for white America, too white for black America. The pressure was crushing. Mark Kopage, the young boy who played her son, later recalled that Diahann was getting all kinds of pressure. He said people were claiming that the show was not black enough. He watched as the woman who had become like a real mother to him began to crumble under the weight. She was, in his words, on the verge of having a nervous breakdown. And then it happened. During one of the seasons, Diahann was hospitalized. The stress, the scrutiny, the attacks from all sides, it had taken its toll on her body and mind. But she came back. She kept going. She kept showing up. Because she understood something that her critics didn't. This wasn't just about her. April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis. The nation erupted in grief and rage. Cities burned. Protests exploded. The dream of peaceful integration seemed to die with him. Just 5 months later, Julia premiered. Think about that timing. America was on fire. Racial tensions were at a boiling point. The civil rights movement was in chaos. And into that storm walked Diahann Carroll, elegant, poised, playing a character living in a world where racism barely existed. The disconnect was jarring. The contrast was painful. No wonder people were angry. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly why it mattered. Because in the midst of all that darkness, all that violence, all that despair, millions of Americans, black and white, sat down together on Tuesday nights and watched Julia Baker live her life. They watched a black woman be professional, be loving, be human. They watched a black child be smart and sweet and normal. They watched integration not as a battlefield, but as a neighborhood. Was it realistic? No. Was it sanitized? Absolutely. But was it necessary? Diahann believed it was.
Years later, she reflected on those criticisms. She acknowledged the pain, she understood the anger, but she never apologized for Julia, because she had seen the letters from the other side. The thousands of letters from Black mothers who said, "Thank you for showing my daughter she can be more than a maid." The letters from Black children who said, "I want to be like Julia when I grow up." The letters from white families who said, "This is the first time we've invited a Black person into our living room." That was the power of Julia, not in what it said about racism, but in what it said about possibility. Still, the cost was enormous. By 1971, Diahann had had enough. The ratings were declining, but more than that, she was exhausted. She couldn't take the scrutiny anymore. She couldn't take the criticism from both sides. She couldn't take the pressure of carrying an entire revolution on her shoulders. So when the network wanted to renew for a fourth season, she said no. Julia ended on March 23, 1971, and Diahann Carroll walked away from the role that had made her a household name. She later admitted it wasn't worth the stress. Some in the Black community criticized the show. They said it was too safe, too sanitized.
They said Julia lived in a perfect, integrated world that didn't reflect the real struggles of Black Americans. They said she had no connection to the civil rights movement happening in the streets. Diahann heard those voices, and they stung. She later admitted she struggled with the portrayal. She wanted the show to address more, to say more, to push harder. But the network was careful, too careful. They didn't want to alienate white audiences. They didn't want controversy. So Julia walked a tightrope. She was groundbreaking, but she was also constrained. Still, the impact was undeniable. Young Black girls across America saw themselves reflected on screen for the first time. They saw a Black woman who was smart, professional, loving, and beautiful. They saw possibility. Diahann Carroll received thousands of letters. Letters from mothers, letters from teachers, letters from little girls who said, "I want to be like Julia when I grow up." That was the power of representation. Behind the scenes, the cast became a family. Mark Kopage played Julia's son, Corey. He was just 5 years old when the show started. Diahann became like a real mother to him. She guided him, protected him, loved him. Lloyd Nolan played Dr. Morton Chegley, Julia's boss at the aerospace medicine clinic where she worked. He was a seasoned actor, a professional, and he treated Diahann with respect and admiration. Betty Beard played Julia's neighbor and friend, Marie Wagadorn. Their friendship on screen was refreshing, natural. It showed that Black and white women could be friends without race being the entire conversation. And then there was Michael Link, who played Marie's son, Earl J. Wagadorn. He and Corey were best friends on the show. 2 little boys, one white, one Black, just being kids. No drama, no tension, just friendship. It sounds simple now, but in 1968, it was radical. The show ran for 3 seasons, 86 episodes. It was nominated for multiple Emmy Awards. Diahann herself was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. But by 1971, the ratings began to decline. The network made changes. They introduced new characters. They shifted the tone, but it wasn't enough. On March 23, 1971, Julia aired its final episode. And just like that, it was over. Diahann moved on. She continued acting. She appeared in Dynasty as Dominique Devereaux, one of the first major Black characters on a prime-time soap opera. She was fierce, glamorous, commanding. She acted in films. She performed on Broadway. She released albums. She lived a full, vibrant life. But Julia was always there, always part of her legacy. In interviews years later, Diahann reflected on the show with mixed emotions. She was proud of what it accomplished. She was proud of the doors it opened. But she also acknowledged its limitations. She wished it had been bolder. She wished it had said more. Still, she never regretted it, because she knew what it meant to that little girl watching at home. She knew what it meant to see yourself on screen, to see your life reflected, your dreams validated. Diahann Carroll passed away on October 4, 2019, at the age of 84. She had battled breast cancer for years. She faced it with the same grace and strength she brought to everything in her life. When the news broke, tributes poured in. From actors, from activists, from fans who had grown up watching Julia. They all said the same thing. She was a trailblazer. She was a pioneer. She was a queen. Julia wasn't a perfect show, but it was a necessary one. It proved that a black woman could lead a television series. It proved that audiences would watch. It proved that representation mattered. Diahann Carroll didn't just play a character. She carried a revolution on her shoulders. She walked through doors that had been locked for generations, and she held them open for those who came after. She made us believe in possibility. She made us dream, and in doing so, she changed television forever. This is the legacy of Julia. This is the legacy of Diahann Carroll, a woman who dared to step into the spotlight and refused to dim her light.